Now having a look at prepaid expenses. Prepaid expenditure in terms of section 23H limits the deduction of these prepaid expenditures in certain instances. So 23H will defer the deduction of certain expenditure that was actually incurred in terms of section 11A, C, D, and 11 Cap A, where the goods or services or benefits will only be received after the end of the year of assessment. Because if you think about it, if I prepay an expense, it actually will meet the general deduction formula. I actually incurred it. I actually paid it. However, section 23A limits some of these prepayments, and we'll see how it works in a minute. If section 23H is applicable, then the deduction can only be claimed to the extent that the goods or services are supplied for the current year of assessment. So it doesn't limit our current year expense. It only will limit what of that expense relates to the next financial year. So if we think about a little decision tree, section 23H does not apply when goods are received or services rendered within 6 months after year end. If the answer is yes, I'm going to receive the prepaid benefit within 6 months, then section 23H is not applicable and I can claim the full deduction, the current year as well as the prepaid portion. If the answer is no, that I won't receive it within the 6 months, but it would be more than the 6 months, then I need to go and aggregate all my prepaid expenses and see whether or not they are more or less than 100,000. If the amount aggregated of all my prepaid expenses is less than 100,000, we will get the deduction in full. If the amount aggregated for all my prepaid expenses exceeds 100,000, then the deduction will be disallowed in terms of section 23H. But remember, it's the deduction for the prepaid portion that is disallowed. So when you're looking at section 23H, we're trying to work out whether section 23H is not applicable. Your first step is to look at the goods and services, and if they are rendered within 6 months after year end, then they are deductible. Section 23H does not apply. Okay, so always check for the amount of months first, okay, or the number of months for which the benefit will be received first. Then, once we know that we are getting the benefit over more than 6 months in our next financial year, we will then need to go and look at all prepayments and aggregate them. If that aggregate exceeds 100,000, then we will be limited to only the amount that relates to the current year. Then any prepaid portion will be disallowed in the current year in terms of section 23H, prohibited, and we would then get it in the next year. There is also the anti-avoidance in terms of section 23F, which we'll have a look at when we do trading stock. If there's an unconditional liability to pay the amount that is imposed by legislation, then section 23H will not apply. So if for some reason you are obliged to pay an amount by legislation and it is a prepayment, that will not be subject to section 23H, because under legislation you are obliged to make that prepayment. Have a look at Silk chapter 6.4 as well as the example 6.7 in Silk. Now if we take you through an example of prepaid expenditure, here we have rent that was prepaid, insurance that was prepaid, and maintenance. The rent was prepaid for 4 months after our year end. So once we see that, or once we work it out in a question, if we give it to you, because it's for 4 months in the next financial year, we know that section 23H cannot apply, and therefore I should be entitled to the full deduction of that 330,000 in the current year. There's no limitation. When it comes to the insurance and the maintenance, here now the prepaid portion is 8 months and 10 months. So now we're going over the 6-month rule. Therefore, we need to work out what portion and what amount relates to the prepaid portion, and we need to add those amounts together. Now, if you add the prepaid portion amounts, we aggregate them together for the insurance and the maintenance, we exceed the 100,000, and therefore we will not be allowed any deduction on that insurance prepayment and on that maintenance prepayment. So the 70,000 prepayment and the 33,750 prepayment, we will not be allowed the deduction in the current year of assessment. We would only get that in the following year when we actually receive those, because the aggregate of the prepayments that we're getting the benefit of for more than 6 months exceeds that 100,000. Please don't forget in a question that the amounts that related to the current year, so for insurance, the 4 months that related to the current year, those would still obviously be deductible. So the 35,000 for the 4 months in the current year would be deductible under Section 11A, and 23H would not be applicable because for those 4 months it doesn't qualify as a prepayment. We actually got the service for the current year. The same with the maintenance. The 2 months that relate to the current year, don't forget to go and claim that 6,750 as a Section 11A deduction, and it cannot be subject to Section 23H because again that portion relates to the current year, not a prepayment. Only the 8 months and the 10 months respectively for insurance and maintenance relate to the prepaid portion, to which we need to go and see whether Section 23H applies.